Hi. Okay. So, before I go on, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
My name is Ginger Dean, and I am the founder of Loving Me After We. Real quick, do you want me to put on my mic? Do I sound okay?
You sound perfectly fine.
Okay. I don't know if I can, I think I'm fine. But let me
No, I
see.
can hear you perfectly.
You can hear me fine? Okay. How about now?
It's still just good. It's still good.
No? Or is
Oh,
it better?
you sound good. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Wait, I can't hear you now. Hold on. Is this better?
Okay, this is good.
Okay,
How did that
sorry.
get better?
All right. So my name is Ginger Dean, and I am the founder of Loving Me After We. I'm also a licensed psychotherapist and founder of also the Inner Circle membership for women.
Yeah. Also, just and I'll be posting the link later. But you coming out with a book, right?
Yes, yes. My book comes out July 16th, which is Loving Me After We, named after, Loving Me After We. And that's essentially where I talk about going from hurting to healing, essentially the stages of healing after, a painful, toxic relationship.
Yeah. Okay, so today, I wanted to cover different aspects of healing from toxic relationships, even situationships or things in your head. So, is it okay if I like just a second. Okay, so firstly, I was wondering if you could talk about limerence.
Limerence? Okay.
Mhm.
What do you want to know about Limerence? What questions do you have?
Okay, so how do you break out of limerence?
So, the first thing about limerence, right? I think it's important for us to realize that it's about a deep longing, obsession, fantasizing about being with someone, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's really about them loving you, not so much about you loving them.
Mhm.
I think some people confuse limerence with just, the typical obsessive thoughts that we might have after a breakup. That's not what limerence is, right? Because it's normal for you to think about someone that you spent time with, that you had feelings for, that you even feel attached to, right?
Mhm.
But with limerence, there is this deeply ingrained fantasy you have in your mind
Mhm.
about that person, about being with that person, about them loving you, and you almost live in your head about them. Like you're disregarding the reality of the situation. That could be, they could be someone who's abusive, they could be someone who's abandoned you, who's rejected you, they
Mhm.
gaslight you, do all the awful things. But in your mind, if you could just get them to love you, if
Mhm.
you could just be with them, then life would be good. Right. And so, how we break out of limerence, it's not really just about, reading one book or, reading an Instagram post. So, what it comes down to is looking at your childhood abuse patterns or childhood trauma patterns, more
Mhm.
specifically around emotional neglect, right? Because as children, one of the things that we do in order to disconnect from abuse, and we do this as adults as well,
Mhm.
is we fantasize, we romanticize. Why do you think like kids, like little girls, we play with Barbies, little
Mhm.
boys, they play with Tonka trucks, for example, and
Right.
they have this entire imaginative world in front of them that they interact with. In psychotherapy, we do sand play therapy with them because they speak through their inner worlds, right? Because they're not exactly able to articulate their feelings, they just feel them more than they're able to articulate them. So when it comes to limerence and the connection to childhood trauma, it's
Mhm.
specifically emotional neglect. What
Mhm.
you want to look at is what role does emotional neglect play in your history? You may think to yourself, emotional neglect is like, maybe one person or one parent was absent from the home.
Mhm.
You can literally have two parents in the home and be rich living in Beverly Hills and experience emotional neglect. And what that really comes down to is you understanding how did that impact your emotional development. So today, you might find yourself longing for love and affection in the same way you did as a child. But as a child, you may not think of yourself as saying, Mommy, Mommy, please love me, though that does happen. It's more like I wonder why mommy doesn't love me. I wonder why daddy won't spend time with me. I
Okay.
wonder why I feel so alone. They might not say that, but they feel it. As adults, we're still engaging what we call attachment hunger because we want to attach to a secure base that loves us back, right? And with limerence, it really does start with unpacking how your history is showing up today. And then also looking at self care, self soothing, because that's what triggers these longing feelings. When you feel that you have to find love outside of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? That becomes problematic because now it's not about you learning to be okay and loving yourself regardless of whether or not someone else does. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes, I have to find someone else to love me so that I can feel whole. And this isn't, a lot of people like to say, well, this is about us being individualistic in terms of like self-healing. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, I think it's a little short-sighted to think of it that way because not everyone has someone who loves them back in their
Right.
world, right? Not everyone has someone they can co-regulate with, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a therapist that you end up learning how to co-regulate with until you learn how to form healthy relationships again, right? Some people are estranged from their family members, right? And so until you have those other relationships develop, one of the things you have to learn is how do I learn to be okay with myself and to love myself in the meantime so that I don't go looking for love in all the places that I didn't get it from? So it could be a partner that mirrors one of your neglectful parents. It
Mm-hmm.
could be a partner that mirrors a verbally, emotionally, or physically abusive parent, right? When we say, well, why doesn't she leave that abusive relationship? It's because it's familiar. It's a trauma bond.
Right.
And with limerence, that's what that is. And so in order to learning how to do that, what you have to look at is, are you ready to make the decision that you're done with the situation? And that's often, I think, the hardest one because we'll say, I don't want to feel like this, but it feels good to fantasize. It feels good to romanticize. It feels good to think about the dreams and the hopes that you have for the relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's harmful, it hurts, especially if it doesn't come to fruition and they're ignoring you and they're avoiding you, right? There's this
Uh-huh.
girl on TikTok that leaves this guy notes on his cars, on his
Okay.
car at his it's like a thing there, yeah. And you know, that's obsessive behavior. And
Right.
so what we want to look at is, are we ready to make the decision, right, that we're done with this pattern?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we then ask our support system to clear to them, hey, I'm done talking about this person. I'm done talking about the situation. So please don't entertain me when I want to obsess about it. But if I need you to hold space for me saying that, like I feel sad, I really feel like I'm grieving the relationship, sure, but don't allow me to sit there and like obsess with you about it. And next, it's about commitment. How can I commit to the journey of healing limerence? How can I start to understand the damage that it's done to my emotional health and my self esteem, for example? Because in chasing this person down for them to love us back, we're rejected because they're often not loving us back. They're not giving us what we want. That's why we're in limerence with them. And then, it's about unpacking your childhood stuff, like I mentioned earlier. It's about really unpacking what is it that what is it that happened in my history
Mm-hmm.
that has allowed me to be where I am today.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, I have addressed and I'm pretty self-aware and um if like a person knows why it's happening or like has addressed their childhood trauma, um
Mhm.
I'm curious as to especially like breaking out of a trauma bond, this sort of inner conflict between wanting to get better but also wanting to hold on at the same time, if that makes sense. Um, how do you deal with that sort of situation where you feel like you do want to get better, but you don't actually want to get better? If that makes sense.
That's about you're holding on to the feel good feelings. Once you start to self-soothe, once you start to engage what we call happy chemicals, then it doesn't feel good anymore because you start to see the reality of the connection for like what it is. So if it's a trauma bond, there's obviously abuse happening there, right?
Right.
And the only way that you are able to stay is because one, on a biochemical front, with oxytocin and serotonin, you are fantasizing, obsessing, romanticizing, which releases those biochemicals, and that's why you feel good about it. And because you live in your head, in your mind about it, you don't really allow yourself to look at the reality of the pain that's involved in the situation. So when you start to engage your own happy chemicals, meaning what are some of your hobbies that you can do? Is there a therapist that you can start to see that so you can start to co-regulate with them, right? So that you can learn different tools and coping skills for you to utilize whenever you start to miss them, right? Because when we're trying to break up with someone, they are often the primary source of our feel-good chemicals, right? Feel-good chemicals. Again, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, right? And so when that person exits our life, they go down. That's why we don't feel good anymore. So our goal is I do encourage just cut them off cold turkey. For those who can't cut them off cold turkey, you then have to do like a slow fade, meaning not that you're slowly ghosting them, though that's not bad either. What you're doing is you're developing hobbies outside of them. You're going to start seeing a therapist. You're going to start to reconnect with your support system, like your girlfriends. You're going to start going out and doing more things outside of them. And this is so that you now have another or a different secure base that you can attach yourself to that has more to do with you and that you control as opposed to them, and whether or not they decide to return a text message, whether or not they decide to even acknowledge that you exist, whether or not they decide that they're going to be nice to you or kind to you. You can't really control that. But by developing this entire other secure life where you are like, okay, when I went to go play volleyball, I felt really, really good about myself because I saw my friends and I was outside and I was playing and I felt like a kid again. And that felt so good. And I want to do more of that. That feels good. And the more we do more of that stuff, then it becomes easier for us to break away from that situation.
Okay, brilliant. So, okay, I know, okay, how do I frame this? All right. Like you said, like let's say someone starts finding like they get in touch with themselves, they you know, meeting their friends and focusing on their hobbies, um, maybe like working out and doing all of those things. Now, and going to therapy. Now, is it possible that even after like doing everything right, like going no contact and doing everything right, you still are stuck in that space?
It's possible, but then I would troubleshoot around whether or not the decision was made. I would troubleshoot around whether or not there are people who will do all the things, but they're not implementing and integrating the things. So they'll read the books about boundaries, right? And say, okay, I've read the book about boundaries. I've gone to therapy, but they're not implementing it because there's a level of resistance that's still there, right?
Okay.
Because when we have resistance around the change and we don't really want to do it, but we know that we need to do it, but we haven't committed, we haven't decided that we're going to do it, that's when you're looking for all the reasons as to why it's not going to work. And therefore you'll do the things performatively, but you won't actually make the changes.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, okay, so about I'm gonna be talking about breadcrumbing. So, I was curious as to like your perspective on what is the fine line between, taking things slowly and not rushing into something because that's not healthy versus just getting breadcrumbed and you don't know where this is heading, if that makes sense.
Say it again.
Like the fine line between breadcrumbing versus heading into a very situationship territory.
I
Like,
would think they both have breadcrumbing elements, right?
yes. So I meant like how do you know if it's like a healthy sort of taking things slowly versus being breadcrumbed?
Because with breadcrumbing, they're more inconsistent. When
Mm-hmm.
you're taking slowly,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're being breadcrumbed, especially if you're anxiously attached.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're taking things slowly, they're still pretty consistent. So they respond to you in a respectable amount of time, for example, right? They follow through and actually planning dates and going out with you. With breadcrumbing, it's, oh, they might respond or they might not respond. If they do respond, they might not even respond to your last message in the text message thread. They just kind of go, they ignore the last message you sent
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say, so how are you today? And you're like, well, one, it's been 10 days. Number two, you didn't even respond to like what I said, right? So that's how you know that you're being breadcrumbed because there's more inconsistency involved with breadcrumbing versus someone who's just taking it slow. They're still being consistent. And both can happen, but then you have to tell that person, hey, I realize we're taking things slow, but I also would like to have a measure of consistency between us. So for example, if it's Monday and they respond to your text message on Friday, that's not,
Mm-hmm.
or if they consistently respond to your text messages every 5 days, every 3 days, that's not
Uh-huh.
consistency. That's breadcrumbing. It's
Breadcrumb line. Okay.
disrespectful, quite frankly.
That makes a little sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, okay, a member has a question. One second.
Uh-huh.
So like there's a sense of familiarity in that toxicity. So how do we keep ourselves from repeating the cycle even after doing all of these right things?
You said there's a sense of what? I didn't hear you.
A sense of familiarity in the toxicity. So keep how do we keep ourselves from repeating the cycle even after doing all the right things?
By creating new cycles with ourselves. So everything that we attach ourselves to that isn't healthy, there's a history behind it, meaning that we have a connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we grew up with really healthy parents,
Mm-hmm.
uh, generally healthy peer group growing up, we're not likely to attach ourselves to people who treat us badly, right? However, because we do have that history, we have to now look at how can I create healthy cycles with myself. So, for example, um, invalidation is something that frequently happens in toxic or painful relationships. They invalidate. They say, "Well, why do you need me to call you every single day? What does it matter if I call you on Friday versus next Tuesday?" Right? They're
Mm-hmm.
invalidating your need for connection, right? But how you validate your need for connection is saying to that person, "Look, this isn't something that we need to argue about. I need connection. I need consistency. I need clarity, right? And ultimately, you'll need commitment. And so if you can't give that to me, I have to commit to my core values around these things. And so it means I have to walk away from you. Now, you don't have to state that formally,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to be willing to do those things for yourself. So even if it's familiar to be involved in really messy relationships, it also comes from you having a messy, painful, almost toxic relationship with yourself. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to be willing to show up for yourself differently. So if I want a partner that tells the truth, I have to be willing to be someone who tells the truth and also be someone who's honest with myself about what my truth is. So if I don't want someone who's a liar, but I'm lying to myself about who I am, that's not
Oh,
really work. So the
okay.
relationship with yourself has to change. And they'll say, well, what does that look like? Again, taking care of yourself in terms of your relationship. Someone curses at you, they're verbally abusive to you in your friendship, you need to check that because then you're only accepting that typically because you have a history of it somewhere, right? So if you're accepting verbal abuse in your friendships and your romantic relationships, the toxicity will continue. But if you're saying, you know what, I'm done with that phase of my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that anymore. So now it means checking the friends who are disrespectful to you and letting them know that's not going to work anymore. You're dating someone and they call you a bitch, you're going to have to be able to say to them, yeah, that's not going to work either, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you'll find that you feel a little lonelier because you don't have as many people around you,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll find that your life and your relationships are far more peaceful because now you have boundaries. Now you know, people know that you command respect without you having to beg it from them just based on how you're carrying yourself. You're not begging them to treat you a certain way. You're simply saying, hey, if at your big age it doesn't occur to you that you shouldn't curse at me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do the emotional label of letting you know that, why that's wrong. I'm not going to convince you that that's wrong. I'm just going to say, hey, that doesn't work for me. And I'm going to have to step away from this connection. And you'll find that the more you're able to set boundaries, the more that you're able to raise your standards in terms of like the people who you associate yourself with, you'll start to have different and better experiences and ultimately less painful, toxic, relationships.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, with regards to okay, um, what is the fine line between being overly forgiving and understanding versus not having boundaries?
Not having boundaries.
Yeah.
Like I can be forgiving with someone
Mm-hmm.
and understand that this is who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also say to you, like I recently had an encounter with someone where they were just being disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like, you cursing at me, you yelling at me, you over talking me is a problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
can love you, but I'm gonna love you from a distance.
Okay.
Because if you're not even, they weren't even able to apologize for like what they
Oh
were
no.
doing. Didn't land the plane for the apology. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, wow. And they were saying, well, you want me to kiss your butt, you want me to kiss your ass, and I thought, well, that's about a disdain that you have for me.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't even want the apology. I can love you, but I can also realize that there's a little bit too much negative energy going on there for me to continue this connection. If I'm going to have relationships that are inherently respectful, even if we have moments with each other, we still have to be able to be self aware enough to really realize, hey, I was abusive. Hey, I was wrong and I'm sorry. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
can be forgiving. I can still forgive that person, but realize they don't have a basic level of respect to be in my life on a consistent basis.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so I have two more questions.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So talking about like self-awareness. Now, obviously that's a crucial part of healing and feeling your emotions and all of that. Now, what if you get in this stuck in this sort of rumination cycle where you're consistently psychoanalyzing yourself but not feeling your emotions, like um
Mhm.
and you know exactly what you're feeling or why you're feeling that, but you can't seem
Mhm.
to get in touch with that emotion despite being completely self-aware.
I think that there are people who consider themselves to be self-aware when really what they're doing is they're intellectualizing
Okay.
what's happening. So they can talk about their feelings, but they're not necessarily connected to them. And that's a form of avoidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Intellectualization is also a defense mechanism where we
Mm-hmm.
talk about boundaries, we talk about feelings, but we're not actually connected to them. So we're connected to them when we feel the pain around having to put up boundaries with someone that
Mm-hmm.
we love, but it also hurts us because we realize that the relationship is going to change. And now I have to deal with the emotional fallout with myself, not
Mm-hmm.
only for that person, but with myself. And learning then how to self soothe through that and reassure myself and validate my need to have boundaries because I want to have healthier relationships. So I think it really comes to you acting on what you're learning in terms of your boundaries and your standards and your core values and your deal breakers,
Okay.
because you're going to feel the fallout. That's going to happen, but
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the work, implementing and integrating what we're learning so that we can have this change in our relationships, not so that we can control people, but so that we can have and experience these changes. But with that change comes some discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have the tools to self soothe through the discomfort and also to have a routine self care plan that helps us take care of ourselves instead of it being like, I'm all alone with my feelings now. This person's not talking to me and I don't know what to do. I know about boundaries and I'm reading all the books. I'm going to therapy. But what you're doing is you're sitting there, but you're not willing to self-soothe. You're not willing to engage in regular self-care. You're not willing to engage in the healthy self-talk, which would validate your need for these boundaries. Because until we have someone else like a therapist or a friend that's willing to speak life into us, we have to also be willing to, you know, flex that muscle of self-validation and remind ourselves that, hey, I made this decision to assert boundaries because I don't want to have these kinds of relationships anymore,
Mhm.
right? And so until I have a partner or a therapist or a friend, a mom, a dad, a grandma, whoever who can also validate me, I have to start doing those things for myself. So that's when we say doing the inner work, we have to be willing to implement and to integrate the work.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So,
Mhm.
you just spoke about self-soothing. So this is my last question. So, do you have like, of course, self-soothing is one of that, but any advice and tips on overcoming fear of abandonment and rejection?
I say, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
look at all the relationships that you have around you right now
Mm-hmm.
where that's an issue. You could be dating someone who breadcrumbs you, they ghost you, they manipulate you, they reject you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at like what I call hot spots in your life,
Okay.
hot spot relationships
Okay.
where they're disrespecting, they're doing all those things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to clear them out, right?
Okay.
And that's going to take some time because you actually don't realize how many of them you have around you because they're all mirrors of all the stuff that you're not like willing to look at. And when you're willing to look at them, you're going to realize how many of them you have, right? First of all, and second of all, you have to also start looking at what is my relationship with abandonment and rejection? How do I reject myself? A little like one thing that I know that we all do, but we don't realize, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if like a cup of milk falls over and spills on the ground in the kitchen, and you go, "Oh my gosh, you're so stupid! Why did you put that on the table?" You're talking negatively to yourself. So when someone else talks to you like that, it feels normal because you're already talking to yourself like that, and you're doing that because someone else talked to you like that. So that's about your rejection wound, and you have to look at again, how can we start to clear out these elements of it in my life? Then we have abandonment. Let's just say you have it could be a friend, a lover, whoever. If
Mm-hmm.
you express how you feel about something to them and they don't like it, and they stop talking to you for 5 days, 10 days, they give you the silent treatment, they
Mm-hmm.
stonewall. You need to put distance between you and that person
No.
until you start to heal a little bit more so that you can better have a better perspective because as you're healing, you don't want to have to heal from the same thing over and over again as you're trying to heal from that thing that you're trying to heal from. Does that make sense? Like if I'm trying to heal
Absolutely.
from abandonment, I can't be in a relationship with someone who
Abandoned.
abandons.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I recently mentioned in my heart sabbatical mentorship is the things that I'm trying to heal from, I
Mm-hmm.
can't engage in. I can't engage people who are doing those things either to me or to other people because it's going to trigger me. And it's not that you don't want to be triggered, but
Mm-hmm.
remember, you can't run a marathon on a broken leg, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can run a marathon on a healed leg, but if while I'm trying to heal, I'm trying to have a relationship with you and you are ghosting me because I speak up for myself, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to keep me. I'm going to like feel like I'm going to relapse every single time we have a conversation because I'm not getting my needs met and I feel emotionally abandoned by you. So maybe I need to put some distance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Until I can feel better about things. And then I think finally it comes, well, not finally, but it does come down to again looking at your childhood trauma history with abandonment and rejection. Sometimes we're choosing people who are literal mirrors of what we experienced in the past. So, for example, when a lot of people come out of their heart sabbaticals, they end
Mm-hmm.
up leaving their relationships because they realize they chose that person as a function of something that was just unresolved in their
Okay.
past. Like, let's just say they chose someone who was like their father. And now
Mm-hmm.
that they're healing, they realize there's no attraction to that person anymore
Mm-hmm.
because we're often attracted to the people who remind us of our trauma histories. So now you're like, I don't even like this person. The attraction was I was trying to make you love me and chasing you, but now I realize I only liked you because you reminded me of my dad. And now that I love myself, I
Yeah.
don't really want anything with this person anymore. So they leave their relationships, right? And the final thing is self-soothing. And the reason why I bring up somatic work, body work so much,
Mm-hmm.
it's because without self-soothing and self-care, we're living in emotional survival mode.
Sure.
Like with everything that's happened in the world over the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, a lot of people are in survival mode. But we tend to think of survival mode as like, oh, I come home from work and I'm tired and I just sit in front of the computer and I don't talk to my friends anymore. And that's part of it, right? But in your relationships, it means that you're so starved for connection that you're
Mm-hmm.
still willing to sit and take the bare minimum. You're still willing to sit and
Right.
take this just to have someone around.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe 10, 15 years ago could relate to someone saying, yeah, they were in a relationship with a Peter Pan just to have someone around in their house.
Uh-huh.
But when you're healing, you're just like, yeah, but they can't contribute. They're going to feel like a child. They're very emotionally immature. They don't have any direction for their life.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're not really healing and you're in that, messier place in your life,
Mm-hmm.
that it feels attractive because you get attention from them. But
Right.
when you're healing and you're like, better, it's like, okay, attention is easy. I want connection now. So I want
Okay.
someone who is a full-fledged adult, not someone who's a kid that needs a mom. And I'm going to be the mom and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to play Bob the Builder and build this person up. And it's
Yeah.
like for them to leave you after you build them up.
I'm actually sorry. I did think of one question when you said call to action.
Uh-huh.
Um, so let's say, when you want to heal and you want to change your ways, um, is it let's say it's someone with PTSD, not a PTSD. Is it good to break their defenses completely and for example, if they're going through a breakup, go no contact when they're already in a very bad place. Um, if that makes sense.
So breaking up with someone who has PTSD.
No, I meant like suppose you have PTSD and are not in that place where you have the strength to take the action, but at the same time they say that there's never a right time. So how do you gently do that while
I
also
would try to make sure that you have some sort of support.
okay.
And I think in that scenario where PTSD could be a factor or just mental health issues could be a factor,
Mm-hmm.
I would try to make sure that you could talk to a therapist who might be able to guide you through and like what to do, how to do it, especially if there is a physical element to it in terms of physical abuse,
Mm-hmm.
an escape plan, for example. But more importantly, giving you the tools to cope with the decision to break up and then going through the breakup and then after the breakup, because we all need that support. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you can have that support and let your friends know, hey, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to need you to like help me stay strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I want us to do things that are going to help me cope. And, can we go hiking, that weekend, because I'm going to want to isolate for 10 weeks and
Mm-hmm.
not talk to anyone. And I don't necessarily want to do that. I don't want to spiral. So I need your support. You can do that with your therapist as well. Your therapist is not going to go hiking with you, but it's important for us when we're in that delicate place to make sure that we have the support that we need, right?
Right.
Because, and if you don't have that like support that you need in terms of like an outside person, then
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you understand the concept of happy chemicals and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're engaged in activities that keep your spirits and emotions up at
Mm-hmm.
least as much as you can, so
Mm-hmm.
that when this person leaves or when you break up with this person and you inevitably start to feel like that
Mm-hmm.
downward spiral, you have
Mm-hmm.
tools in your toolbox, in your somatic toolbox,
Mm-hmm.
that can help you recover.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming here. And
You're
I just want
welcome.
to say your content, simply brilliant. What you're doing is God's work.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry, we have like a member's question. Can
Uh-huh.
we end it with that? Okay. Um, how to prioritize yourself in a relationship where you are your partner's primary support system?
How to prioritize yourself.
In a relationship when you are your partner's primary support system?
Oh, I believe in just doing it. And then when they see the change, allowing
Mm-hmm.
them to adjust. Maybe you have a conversation with them and you say, hey, I realize that I am, your primary support. I
Mm-hmm.
realize that, we mean a lot to each other in this relationship, but I've been
Mm-hmm.
starting like I need to kind of do some more things for myself, and I've been thinking about doing X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not framing it like you're asking them for permission,
Mm-hmm.
but what you're simply doing is telling them. If
Okay.
they have feelings about it, let them have their feelings about it, because I am a strong believer in allowing adults to manage their emotions. And if they're willing to let you go on and spread your wings and do whatever, sure. If they want to process with you, for example, feeling a little abandoned, sure, that's fine too. Because in healthy relationships, we don't just say deal with it. We say, well,
Mhm,
here's tell me what you feel. Tell me what this feels like for you. And, how can I, help reassure you that it's not that I'm going to run away from you, but I just need to have some time for myself. That
mhm,
could look like too, going away on a 2-3 day girls trip, for example, right?
mhm.
So how can I support you? How can I, not support you, but how can I help you feel like more secure as I start to spread my wings?
Right.
And
Okay.
and that's how, like, that's a conversation that you're going to have, instead of it being like, well, I'm going to go because I've been doing too much for you and I
Mhm,
can't do this anymore, right? It's more about, I need to spread my wings, but I also know that it's going to be a change in our dynamic, and I know that it's not going to feel good initially.
mhm,
You can let me know. And if it doesn't feel good, what are some things that I can do? Also, remember, you're going to need to have boundaries,
mhm.
right? Because they're not used to you having boundaries. They're going to
Right.
want you to, I don't know, come back home before the street lights turn on or something like that. No, that's not an option. Like, if I'm going to be out with
Uh-huh.
friends at dinner at 7, I'm probably going to be home at 10, and that's
Mhm,
okay, right?
mhm,
Because I'm not your child and you're not my parent. And they're probably not going to be used to that, right? But allow them to get used to it. If it's a healthy relationship, you'll have conversations. You'll have several conversations. They
mhm,
should be asking, so how did it feel to get out and just do some more things with your friends? And you tell them all about it, right?
mhm.
And you just allow each other to feel your feelings, but then support each other through this transitional change in your dynamic too.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question. And again, thank you so much for coming here and just doing what you do.
Thank
And,
you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the questions. Thank you.
and I can't wait to read your book. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Yeah, it's coming up. I'm supposed to be I'll post the information, but I'll be in New
Yay.
York for an interview. But yeah, it comes out July 16th, and
July
it'll be
16th.
in all the booksellers. Thank you so much for
Yay.
having
Can't
me.
wait.
Appreciate it.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.